What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to another How to Beat live low stakes poker video. Today's topic is straddling. So I get a lot of questions about straddling. What positions is it, or what position is it profitable from? Is it profitable at all? How do we adjust to games where there is a straddle on? So as far as if we should straddle or not, I talked about this as with a lot of other topics that we're bringing back up here in the year 2025, about 7 to 10 years ago. I'd say roughly 8 years ago, there were a lot of topics like this that I covered. And one of the main things I discussed is that I think button straddling, if your room allows for it, is something that you can consider. If you have two good thinking opponents to your direct left, you force them to act first in the blinds. And because they're forced to act first in the blinds, if that's how your room has the action come to fruition, if that makes sense. Like a lot of times the room will have a button straddle on and then the small blind will act first. Some rooms do it a little differently. I'm not as accustomed to that. So this is just more for if your room does do it, just basically small blinds first to act. If two good players are forced to act first out of the blinds, they're going to act accordingly. They're probably not going to play as many hands. You get a lot more truthful info out of them right then and there. And that's a pretty big advantage for you. Now, that was true back then. I think that's still true now. But the big thing with straddling is it really depends on how you believe your table is going to react to it. Generally speaking, I think we should button straddle if given the opportunity, depending on the type of game you're in. Now, I used to think that I would just straddle to help get the game out of the muck if it was kind of like a game that just needed a little juice. The problem is a lot of those games, those players are not looking to play artificially larger stakes. Essentially, let's say it's a 1-2, your straddle makes it 1-2-5. Let's say it's a 1-3, your straddle makes it 1-3-6, if you will. 2-5 becomes 2-5-10. A lot of these players are playing at the level they want to play at, and they don't want the pots to artificially get larger right away. And so they actually start folding a lot more often. Now, that ends up happening, in my experience, more often when there's actually a gun straddle. I always used to think that the button straddle killed action much more than the gun straddle, but it seems that players are much more willing to take on a player that is straddling from the button or in position because they believe that their range should be wider. And I would say most every time it is going to be wider. So to maximize, if you believe you have a significant post-flop skill edge, to maximize that edge, to give at least a decent to good game even more juice, to spark a little action, I think the button straddle is a really good idea. Now, like I said, for gun straddle, if everybody at the table agrees to a gun straddle, then it's fine, I think. But otherwise, if it's kind of every other player is maybe straddling at the table, I would stick to only the button straddle. I think there's just more risk with the gun straddle. It also tends to tighten games up more often than not based on the experience that I have. So, yeah, button straddle is good. Gun straddle not as good. I also think that, in my experience, if the entire table is straddling, that's not actually great. I think it's better that if some of the players are, some aren't. But it just kind of depends. It depends on the people at the table. You want the game to be as fun as possible. You want to avoid any toxicity, if that makes sense. So yeah, I believe in button straddling. Gun straddling only if everybody wants to do it. I'm going to play ball and do that. I think it's good for everybody to kind of gamble in the same manner, if that makes sense, with like these kind of zero EV spots where, like I said, if everybody's gun straddling, that's fine, but I definitely prefer button straddle. Now, as far as I think a lot of players have this misconception of if they have to button straddle, they just all of a sudden have to become these really aggressive players. They have to attack limps. You have to keep in mind that players are aware of you straddling. They're not always going to try to trap you, but that can become more of a thing. They're expecting you to raise in that spot. So there are a lot of times where if I'm playing with players, if I know them pretty well, regulars, if you will, if I know that there's a good chance that they are limping in with a stronger range or they're trying to trap me, then I actually will play a pretty reasonable range from the button straddle, for example, and it won't be me just trying to blast off and steal all these pots, which if I have some players in there that I know I can do that to, then of course I'll widen my range up and I'll take advantage of that. But yeah, you also have to be a little bit mindful of what your perceived image is when you are straddling. Players are going to try to probably trap you a little bit more in that aspect. Now, as far as the main tip I wanted to give out in this quick video, facing straddles. What does a straddle do? What artificially increases the limit of the game. Like if you have like a 1-2 game and it becomes now 1-2-5, if you had $200 at the table and you had 100 bigs to begin with, well, now you essentially have less than 50 bigs. So it artificially shrinks stack sizes. So what does that mean for us as far as how does that change our strategy? Well, we really want to now err on the side of choosing hands to play that are going to work well in lower SPR situations. So that's going to be like obviously pairs, the bigger or the larger the pair, the better. And then a lot of the broadways, hands that can make strong top pairs that can commit flop and turn essentially in these lower SPR situations. So you want to make sure you're not playing too many of the speculative hands when there's a straddle on. Like you still are going to have those in your range if you think you need them for a little board coverage, a little deception. But keep in mind, it's not smart to, if it's, let's say it's 1-3 and there's a $6 straddle on and somebody raises to $25 or something, it's not really smart to cold call with a hand like pocket fives, thinking that you're going to set mine, because now stacks have significantly become much smaller just due to the artificial increase in limit of the game. So you have to keep that in mind. You definitely want to err on the side of the hands that either already are bigger pairs or can make big one pair types of hands. So yeah, if there are any questions or comments, go ahead and let me know. Straddling is not overly complex, and there's definitely differing opinions on it. Again, in conclusion, it's button straddle. Prefer that much more so than the under the gun straddle. And I do think you guys should experiment with doing it if you think you have a post-flop skill edge, especially if the table is welcoming to it. Like if they're inviting it, like if it's not a table full of nits, that doesn't really help them get out of the muck. They're just going to fold even more. They just don't want to deal with it. But if you have a table that's at least decent, or you have some players that are giving some action, that can definitely help make the game even better, so to speak. And then if you are facing straddles, or are you putting a straddle on yourself, remember that does kind of artificially shrink stack sizes. So we have to adjust our ranges a little bit in that sense. So yeah, any questions or comments, let me know. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, visit us at archcitypoker.com for more content like this. Thanks.